and welcome to Crash Course Cryptozoology. Today's video brings to discussion a particular piece of footage that has attempted to make the rounds rather frequently online, but is still relatively unknown. Although the footage has no official name, elements of the backstory and the alleged location it was shot at give us a candidate for a viable name to refer to the footage as, that being the Mozambique footage. Mozambique being the African nation in which this particular piece of film was supposedly shot. The question is, what is the Mozambique footage? To understand what the Mozambique footage is before we go into details, it would be good to know exactly what the Mozambique footage refers to. The footage is supposedly from a trail camera left in Mozambique in 2014 and shows what the original uploader of the video suggests is a Fofi. Fofi is a somewhat contested term supposedly existing in areas of Africa, according to research done by cryptozoologist William Gibbons. The credibility and validity of Gibbons' research isn't the subject of this video, but it is important to know that some of it is in contestation, like any researcher. Still, for the purposes of this video, we will assume that Fofi, which essentially refers to giant spiders, is at the very least present in local stories in this area of the world, as Gibbons' research suggests, as well as other elements from other researchers. Described generally as a very large spider, usually fitting the description of a tarantula, perhaps up to 3 to 5 feet in diameter, including the legs, the Fofi is an interesting case, and the actual logistics of it won't be discussed here, but rather this video will serve as an examination of what is essentially, in the Mozambique footage, the only alleged photographic evidence for the Fofi. Moving onward to the video itself, the Mozambique footage was uploaded by CryptoDragon UK to YouTube on September 12, 2018, with a description that reads the following. A legendary cryptid, Fofi, has finally been caught on camera back in 2014 in Mpumalanga, Mozambique by some campers. They heard stories of native villagers coming across giant burrows and seeing giant webs around the Mpumalanga area. So they decided to take a camera with them, and before they tucked into their tent, they put the camera on a nearby tree and began recording overnight. In the morning, they were shocked at what they had captured. Credit to Owleye for stumbling onto the video. Look in between the two trees at the 40-second mark. So, without further ado, I'll show the original footage and the enhanced version provided by CryptoDragon UK, as well as my own enhancement, which we'll be discussing later. It's hard to catch the object in some versions of this footage. It happens rather fast, whatever it is. And even though we get a good look at the terrain, we have a difficult time really seeing what it is that's going on here. We see an object that certainly moves, and it seems to move in a rather strange way, and in enhancements we can see that it does appear to have either perhaps segments of its body or appendages that move as the object itself moves. The movement itself is one of the stranger elements of the video. It's quite smooth. Even though these sort of individual parts of this object do move along with the object, which we would assume to be a kind of natural way something moves, of course, the movement overall does also have a rather unnatural feel to it. It's very smooth. The stop it makes is rather abrupt, and as it moves away towards the end of the video, it looks rather strange, for lack of a better term. So, what is it exactly that we're looking at? We're seeing this kind of ovular shape with these segments to it. To know what we're looking at is a task that can't be done with this level of footage. It certainly seems relatively agreeable that the object resembles the shape of a spider, and in accordance with the trees nearby would be a rather large spider. But at the same time, of course, not everyone will agree with this. A particular commenter on the original video named Nixie Pixie pointed out, if you are thinking spider, then that is what you'll see. I asked my husband to watch it without telling him what it's thought to be, and he instantly said it looked like some kind of spotted deer coming up to the water. Whether or not one sees this, it definitely opens up the idea that this is low quality enough footage to be debated on terms of simply the object's identity alone. If the object is really in the footage, it's definitely animated and moving, probably of its own accord, even though it looks rather unnatural. Before we talk about the unnatural elements a bit deeper, it might be good to cover the things that do look natural. As the subject actually moves into frame, again, we see these individual parts moving, and that is, generally speaking, what we would expect to observe in a spider. The appendages moving, the body forward, and moving it off frame as well. Again, it's a very sudden movement, but it certainly isn't an impossible speed, nor an impossible locomotion. There is a question about this, though, and that is, if this is an arachnid of any kind, are we seeing it from the front or from the side? And this is an important question because the way that it comes into frame is what looks natural. It doesn't move its appendages or segments, or individual parts for that matter, in the same way that it does coming into the frame, as it moves away from the frame. It looks a bit stranger and to some degree looks almost like an editing transition in a video. However, even though it looks that strange, it's difficult to find software that allows for that kind of transition where one can have these individual parts moving and not moving. So this particular moment in the video is rather confusing. It looks unnatural, but lacks a proper explanation for why the first part of it looks natural, and vice versa, the beginning looks natural, but lacks a proper explanation for why it looks unnatural in the second half. In terms of the anatomy of spiders, there are a few things that might point us in interesting directions. Most spiders cannot walk sideways. And this is important because if we're seeing this object, and it is an arachnid of some kind, from the front, what that means is that it's facing the front as it comes into frame and then moves to the side, still facing the front as it moves off frame, meaning it's walking sideways. Most spider species cannot do this, except for the crab spider. The problem being is that crab spiders are a very, very tiny form of spider. Their particular body type, which is actually what they're named for, does allow them to walk sideways like a crab, but it also seems to constrict their growth size. The subject is also kind of more long than it is ovular or circular, so the body type of a crab spider doesn't quite fit. We know that sideways movement is possible with that body type, but we do not see it in any other spider body type. So the question of what direction this object is facing and whether or not it's real are still contested because the movement of the object is so unusual. Perhaps the turn does happen for it to turn to the side, but is so subtle that it's hard to see. All in all, the Mozambique footage is a very fascinating case because it's hard to make any conclusions from it. It doesn't fully look like a video transition, nor does it move like arachnids that, for the most part, zoology is familiar with. Which means that to explain it in arachnid terms, we would need to get into hypothetical territory. However, the same, roughly speaking, seems to exist for an explanation involving video editing. We're left with a bit of a mystery. And of course, the lack of official backstory to the footage also complicates things. I hope to be in contact soon with the person who uploaded this footage, or perhaps even the person who recorded this footage, to get more details, if any are actually to be found. And of course, as always, I would love to know what all of you think of this footage. That being said, until next time.